from a civil libertarian perspective, one of the worst moments in the Cold War when people's lives and reputations were destroyed. They were driven to suicide by entirely baseless claims about being disloyal to their country based on nothing other than their political opinion. It's sinister to accuse people of having divided loyalties or being disloyal because of their criticism of their own government. Being critical of your own government is one of the core constitutional rights that you have. Yesterday there was a hearing where they summoned the leaders of social media companies, including the CEO of TikTok. And the idea was to tell them and to show the public, these are the villains. Not because of what they really do that's harmful, which is politically censor at the command of the United States, but instead to claim they're allowing too much material, including harmful material, to be permitted, because what they want is these companies, under threat of being banned or punished, to agree that they will give the government more control over what they will remove. That's everything that's going on here. And just like Democrats know, a lot of their followers fear most Russia, and so what they do is they say, look at how much these platforms are allowing Russian disinformation. We need to be able to censor. The Republican Party knows that what most stimulates the fear of their voters is China. And so they set out to prove that TikTok is a weapon of the Chinese Communist Party, as are the executives running TikTok. And one of the most embarrassing exchanges happened yesterday at that hearing in pursuit of that false narrative, which was the work of Senator Tom Cotton. And here he is questioning the CEO of TikTok, Mr. Chu. And here is that exchange.
I think they then had a lawsuit and it was overturned. I can't remember the details.
No,
it's another company.
The Biden administration that reversed those sanctions, just like, by the way, they reversed the terrorist designation on the Houthis in Yemen. How's that working out for them? But it was sanctioned as a Chinese communist military company. So you said today, as you often say, that you live in Singapore. Of what nation are you a citizen?
Singapore.
Are you a citizen of any other nation?
No, Senator.
Have you ever applied for Chinese citizenship?
Senator, I served my nation in Singapore. No, I did not.
Do you have a Singaporean passport?
Yes, and I served my military for two and a half years in Singapore.
Do you have any other passports from any other nations?
No, Senator.
Your wife is an American citizen. Your children are American citizens.
That's correct.
Have you ever applied for American citizenship?
No, not yet.
Okay. Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
Senator, I'm Singaporean. No.
Have you ever been associated or affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party?
No, Senator. Again, okay. I'm Singaporean.
Let me ask you some.
Now, let's just stop there for a second. Every time these CEOs appear before the Senate or Congress, they try very hard to be extremely respectful. The CEO of TikTok tries hardest because he knows he's in a more vulnerable position. At least Facebook and Google and Twitter are American companies, largely, though not entirely, run by American citizens. And so they're harder to villainize and demonize. But as you just heard, the CEO of TikTok is not an American citizen. His wife and children are. But he is a citizen of Singapore, the only country where he's ever been a citizen. And that's why when Tom Cotton is saying, are you a member of the Chinese Communist Party? He can't believe he's being asked that. He's trying to say, I'm Singaporean. In fact, I served in the military of my country. And the reason he's reacting that way is because Singapore is a country that is military aligned, not with Beijing, but with Washington. Singapore has no interest in being some kind of a subservient country to China. People who grew up in Singapore are taught the importance of Singaporean independence. And Singapore is aligned far more with the United States and with the West than they are with China. Now, does anyone actually believe, just look into your deepest brain, the part of your brain that is the most honest, and just ask this question, if the CEO of TikTok had been an American and looked American in the expectation of what an American looks like, or had been European and looked European in the expectation of what people like Tom Cotton think Europeans are supposed to look like, do you think there's any slight chance that Tom Cotton would have asked them, are you a member of the Chinese Communist Party? Now, let's leave aside the issue that that question was the worst expression of the biggest abuse of the Cold War, which was the McCarthyite era. And I know some people have kind of revised their view of McCarthy. Some people have, I have not. Because the worst part of McCarthyism was that it was completely lacking in due process. It accused people of terrible things, crimes. And Joe McCarthy never presented any evidence. He always claims he had a list in his briefcase. He had the evidence in his briefcase. And huge numbers of people were falsely accused of being members of the Russian Communist Party, the Soviet Communist Party, or loyal to the Soviet Union, or controlled by the Kremlin, who never were. That's one of the reasons why I was so sickened by Russiagate, because it so obviously resonated and was redolent of that, from a civil libertarian perspective, one of the worst moments in the Cold War, when people's lives and reputations were destroyed. They were driven to suicide by entirely baseless claims about being disloyal to their country based on nothing other than their political opinions. Similar to the case we covered last night of that black socialist leftist anti-war group being accused of being Russian agents because of their political opinions regarding Ukraine. It's sinister to accuse people of having divided loyalties or being disloyal because of their criticism of their own government. Being critical of your own government is one of the core constitutional rights that you have. And so the line that everybody remembers from the worst moments of McCarthyism was, are you now or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? It was an interrogation of American citizens brought before Congress to be grilled about their views. And it led to witch hunts, even if you think there was an actual problem with communism in the United States. So for Tom Cotton, wittingly or unwittingly, to model his questioning based almost verbatim on the notorious symbol of McCarthyism should be very disturbing to you, no matter what your views are on China. But the fact that he's obviously exploiting, and anyone who watches my show knows I don't make claims like this easily, is because there's no avoiding it here. He looks at the CEO of TikTok and sees someone who is Asian, and either out of ignorance or malice knows that he can more easily link them persuasively to China, as if every person who's Asian is loyal to China. Tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people in Asia hate China. People who live in Taiwan look very similar, much more so than Singaporeans do to the Chinese, because they are ethnically Chinese. And nobody would accuse them of, because of their appearance, being members of the Chinese Communist Party. So this was a shoddy, or worse, line of questioning by Tom Cotton. It was embarrassing. It reeked of ignorance. I don't think Tom Cotton knew that Singapore was a different country than China. And if he did know that, he was deliberately exploiting the ignorance of his constituents and the people who trust him, which on some level is even worse. And it was all done to manufacture this storyline that just take a look at the CEO of TikTok and you will see the proof that this must be a person taking orders from Beijing. Now we're going to show you with the facts of what TikTok is and what the parent company is, why, and what TikTok has actually been doing when censoring. We showed you some of it, why this is a false narrative. It's being done so that people like Tom Cotton can get control and tell TikTok, look at what we're doing to you. Look at the public rage we're stimulating against you. Look at the threat we're making to ban your company from TikTok, from the United States. You better start listening to us, and us telling you what you can and cannot allow. I mean, if you look at his life, the CEO of TikTok, I mean, it's not easy, it's not hard rather to see what he is. He was raised in a capitalist society. He went to the London School of Economics. After that, he went to go and work at Goldman Sachs. While in Goldman Sachs, he met his American wife. They had American children. They stayed in the United States. He founded, or was part of the founding of TikTok. He now runs it as CEO. He's become very wealthy as a result. He's a pure capitalist. His goal, his driving force is capitalism, is profit. And that's the reason why he doesn't care if he has to turn over censorship decisions to the United States government. He doesn't care who dictates censorship. He didn't create TikTok to spread an ideology. He created TikTok to make money, and he's very good at it. It's been working well. And he doesn't want to jeopardize the loss of the most lucrative market that he has, which is the United States. And all you have to do is look at his life and listen to him. And it's obvious that that's what motivates him. Let's listen to the rest.
Hopefully simple questions. You said earlier, in response to a question, that what happened at Tiananmen Square in June of 1989 was a massive protest. Did anything else happen in Tiananmen Square?
Yes, I think it's well documented. There was a massacre.
There was the indiscriminate slaughter of hundreds or thousands of Chinese citizens. Do you agree with...
Do you see what just happened there? He tried to say that somehow, when referring to Tiananmen Square, he didn't use language harsh enough as though he was protecting the Chinese government or was afraid to criticize the Chinese government. And then when he asked him again, what else happened in Tiananmen Square, without blinking, without the slightest bit of hesitation, he said, yeah, there was a massacre by the government against protesters. And then Tom Cotton barely heard that and said, yeah, huge numbers of people were killed. And he was like, yeah, exactly, I just said that. So the whole idea of even dragging business executives before Congress and start interrogating them on what their views are on historical and political events to have to state their ideology on controversial questions is completely inappropriate. Why does it matter what his ideology is? Why does it matter what his views are on other countries? Generally, CEOs of global companies don't like to take sides in geopolitics for the exact reason that they're motivated by profit. They don't want to alienate the American government. They don't want to alienate the Chinese government. They want access to these valuable, lucrative markets. But Tom Cotton, having just been embarrassed and trying to prove that this Singaporean capitalist who served in the military of Singapore on the side of the United States was somehow a member of the Communist Party, is now trying to resort to demonstrating that he won't criticize China, even though he just did, without the slightest hesitation. Here's the rest.
With the Trump administration and the Biden administration, that the Chinese government is committing genocide against the Uyghur people?
Senator, I've said this before. I think it's really important that anyone who cares about this topic or any topic can freely express themselves on TikTok.
It's a very simple question that unites both parties in our country and governments around the world. Is the Chinese government committing genocide against the Uyghur people?
Senator, anyone, including, you can come into TikTok and talk about this topic
I'm asking you,
or any topic that matters to you.
You are a worldly, cosmopolitan, well-educated man who's expressed many opinions on many topics. Is the Chinese government committing genocide against the Uyghur people?
Actually, Senator, I talk mainly about my company, and I'm here to talk about what TikTok does.
I mean, first of all, as we know from what's happening in Israel and Gaza and the proceedings brought by South Africa in the International Court of Justice, the word genocide is a very complex term. It's a widely debated term. And the idea that the CEO of TikTok is supposed to have a whole set of opinions ready that please the United States government but alienate a lot of other governments where his company wants access to by pronouncing something that, contrary to what Tom Cotton's saying, is very much in dispute in the entire world. There's been no International Court of Justice ruling that China has engaged in genocide against the Uyghurs. There are people all over the world who vehemently dispute that characterization. The CEO of TikTok doesn't have the competence to make that judgment, nor does he have the desire to, precisely because he's not there as a political actor. He's there as a businessman. And what he's saying is, what's important is not my view. What's important is that everybody have the right to debate these issues freely using free speech. That's what we offer at TikTok. Isn't that what you would want Mark Zuckerberg to say if he were asked about, say, his views of abortion? Don't you think Mark Zuckerberg would be reluctant to say whether he's pro-choice or pro-life? It was always the Michael Jordan view that I'm not going to take sides in politics. Why? And reporters would say, why aren't you going to take sides in politics, Michael? And he would say, because Republicans buy sneakers too. He was a businessman, Michael Jordan. He didn't want to be a political activist. He wanted to sell as many sneakers as he could. And he did. I'm not saying that's noble. That's not how I approach life. But a lot of people do. That's why I'm not a businessman. But if you were a business person leading a company, of course the shareholders would want you to avoid political controversy and just stay in the middle. Go ask Mark Zuckerberg or the head of Shell or Exxon what their views are on any of these inflammatory issues. You think they're going to want to get involved in that? They do only when they perceive it's very much in their interest, like Disney siding on the side of LGBT equality because so many of their employees are LGBT, because so many people who come from Europe and the United States support that cause. But in general, corporations want to stay out of political conflicts. So there's nothing suspicious about him not wanting to weigh in on this very complex and contested question just to prove somehow that he's ideologically aligned with Tom Cotton. That's not what any business person should have to do.
Is the Chinese government committing genocide against the Uyghur people?
Actually, Senator, I talk mainly about my company, and I'm here to talk about what TikTok does.
Yes or no? You're here to give testimony that's truthful and honest and complete. Let me ask you this. Joe Biden last year said that Xi Jinping was a dictator. Do you agree with Joe Biden? Is Xi Jinping a dictator?
Senator, I'm not going to comment on any world leaders.
What?
Okay, so first of all, you got a little glimpse there of, again, how identical or very similar the Democratic and Republican parties are when it comes to foreign dictators. A lot of people on the right like to pretend that Joe Biden is weak on Russia, whatever that means. In fact, under Joe Biden, the U.S. military has militarily encircled China with bases, new bases and old bases in Japan and the Philippines and South Korea, various islands near China, a new nuclear deal with Australia, a new alliance against China with the UK and Australia. Joe Biden, was the first president in decades to come out and say that he would be willing to fight a war, and in fact would fight a war against China if it invaded Taiwan. Never has a president been willing to say that before. They've always said, maintain what's called strategic ambiguity. And Joe Biden called Xi last year a dictator, just as Tom Cotton said. They have constant agreement on Ukraine, on Russia, on Israel and Gaza, on Yemen, on the Middle East, on China. But there's no reason why these CEOs of these social media companies should be duty-bound to go and state their political opinions before the Congress. The issue of Singapore, the reason why Tom Cotton embarrassed himself, is because there are countries that are somewhat captive to or a little more leaning in the direction of Beijing. Singapore is most definitely not one of them. Here's the U.S. State Department in April of 2023 announcing its latest security cooperation with Singapore. Quote, Singapore is one of the United States' strongest bilateral partners in Southeast Asia and plays an indispensable role in supporting the region's security and economic framework. The United States cooperates with Singapore on the full range of security issues, to include border security, maritime security, military preparedness, counterproliferation, cybersecurity, and counterterrorism. Singapore has operated advanced fighter jet detachments in the continental United States for the past 27 years. That was why he was so mystified when Tom Cotton was trying to link him to China. He kept saying, what? I'm Singaporean. I served in the Singaporean military. You know, your military partner. Why would you imply I have some loyalty to the Chinese government? Here is the Ministry of Defense of Singapore in September of last year, so just a few months ago. Singapore and U.S. armies conclude exercise Lightning Strike. Quote, the Singapore and U.S. armies interact extensively through exercises, professional exchanges, and the cross-attendance of courses. These interactions have enhanced the professionalism, personal rapport, and interoperability between both armed forces, as well as reaffirmed the excellent and long-standing defense relations between Singapore and the United States. So that, I think, sheds even worse light on what Tom Cotton tried to do.